To the women of the world from the women delegation and advisors at the First Assembly of the United Nations.
It is important to consider the presence of violence within society.
The message to the women of the world is, arise.
The women's movement is a political movement.
Human rights are women's rights, and women's rights are human rights. We are all witnessing an historic moment, a moment characterized by unprecedented solidarity.
Today, we have adopted a landmark resolution. We have decided to establish UN Women. Now it is time for United Nations to use this campaign so that we can make a world better for all, where men and women can work together.
fabulous cast joining us. We had the Secretary General, we had a female head of state, female ambassadors, female peacekeepers, a media mogul, a princess, a music star, 2 Academy Award winners, and all of you. That is what I call a very powerful team. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I want to thank all of you, and the Secretary General, and everyone who's at the United Nations. Have a good evening. Thanks for coming. Good night. We are Wonder Woman.
Mr. President of General Assembly, Excellencies, Michelle Bachelet, Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Juju Chan, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Tonight is a celebration of UN Women, and tonight is a time to say thanks to all those who made this launch possible. Thanks to the governments that acted with the vision. And thanks to our dedicated UN staff, especially Deputy Secretary General Dr. Asha Rose Migiro. And thanks to our partners in the NGO community whose relentless advocacy led to success. Ladies and gentlemen, the negotiations were tough, but we knew why we needed UN Women, and we prevailed. I'm especially proud that we got Michelle Bachelet, an internationally renowned leader, former President of Chile, to serve as the founding executive director. The campaign to establish UN Women is a part of a larger international drive to promote gender equality, empower women, and demand an end to sexual violence. There has been progress. Just this week, a Congolese army colonel was convicted of crimes against humanity for a case involving mass rape. We are also seeing international solidarity in the area of health. Last year, during the MDG summit meeting, the member states pledged $40 billion to the global strategy for women and children's health. This year, UN Women will help turn this global strategy into a worldwide reality. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies, tonight is a time to celebrate and say thanks, but it is also a time to remember why we worked so hard to create UN Women. We did it for the girl who cannot go to school simply because she's a girl, and the billions of women and girls who need help and protection. We did it for the women who need a treatment for HIV, including mothers nursing their babies. We did it for the women who deserve to be sitting as equals in boardrooms and parliaments. This is what UN Women is working for in the places where we are most needed. For example, we are supporting women's shelters that, for vulnerable women and girls, can mean the difference between life and death. We are working to eliminate harmful traditional practices and change mindsets. We are working to make sure that Not only does every girl get an education, but the opportunity to put it to good use. The both of you and women could not be better timed. This year marks 100th anniversary of International Women's Day. We have come a long way in a century, but we still have to go far. UN Women takes us an important step in the more and more. We are putting women at the center of activities around the world. Women are the breadwinners who can help their families and their countries out of poverty. They are the mothers who provide food, the leaders who encourage education and raise the next generation. Women are the police and peacemakers who can help forge peace and stability. The United Nations is investing in women because it is the right thing to do and because it's a smart thing to do, possibly one of the smartest things we can ever do. I will support UN Women in every way I can as a Secretary General of the United Nations. I will support UN Women with every ounce of my energy and commitment to make this happen. And thank you very much for your commitment and your leadership.
Secretary General, to all of you, governments, civil society, women's organizations, grassroots organizations, all of you, that thanks to your work and your dedication and commitment have brought us to this moment. The decision to establish UN Women reflects global concern with the slow pace of change. It is no longer acceptable to live in a world where young girls are taken out of school or forced into early marriage, where women's employment opportunities are limited, and where the threat of gender-based violence is a daily reality at home, in the street, at school, and at work. Women's rights are human rights, and the neglect of women's rights means lack of progress on gender equality, but also means that that enormous social and economic potential of half of the population is so underutilized. The world is losing a great potential. And in order to tap this potential, we must open up spaces for women in political leadership, in science and technology, as trade and peace negotiators, as SMEs, but also as heads of corporations. And as the Secretary General said, supporting faster progress for women is not only morally right, it makes good political, social, and economical sense. This holds true whether we are talking performance on gender equality measures in 130 correlation between progress in gender equality and women's empowerment and GDP per capita. And a recent study found that Fortune 500 companies with the highest numbers of women on their boards were 53% more profitable than those with the fewest women board members. Where women have access to secondary education, good jobs, land, and other assets, national growth and stability are enhanced. And we see lower maternal mortality, improved child nutrition, greater food security, and less risk of HIV and AIDS. My own experience has taught me that there's no limit to what women can do. We know that. I was speaking from those who support their families in the hardest of circumstances, to those who become Minister of Gender Affairs, Health, Finance, Foreign Affairs, or why not, Head of Government and Head of State. We must do even better in tapping into women's strength, women's industry, and women's wisdom. This is not an issue confined to any one group of countries or societies. It is a universal issue. We must convince all political actors, including Minister of Finance and Trade, as well as health and education, that we're not only talking about rights. Of course we are talking about rights, but we're also talking about social vitality, political stability, and economic growth. UN Women alone cannot do what needs to be done. We will not replace the good work done by others. Rather, we will harness the full capacity and comparative advantage of each, so there is even greater impact and faster progress. We shall all be doing more, not less. In addition to a role of mobilizing, advocacy, mainstreaming, coordinating, and leveraging the efforts of others, we and women will focus trying to expand women's voice, leadership, and participation, continue struggling ending violence against women, strengthening women's full participation in conflict resolution and peace processes, enhancing women's economic empowerment, ensuring that gender priorities are reflected in national plans and budget, including capacity to support CEDAW reporting. And of course, we will be building partnership because we won't be away from women's health, from the struggle for HIV and AIDS women, from people who are migrated workers and have no labor conditions and no benefits at all. I am determined that UN Women will offer a new dynamic to the global dialogue on gender equality and women's empowerment, and bring new energy, drawing on multiple talents and bringing together men and women from different countries and communities in a shared endeavor. Je suis déterminée à ce que l'ONU Femmes apporte une dynamique nouvelle au dialogue global sur l'égalité des sexes, avec une énergie renouvelée. En utilisant de nombreux talents, ONU Femmes parviendra à rassembler les hommes et les femmes afin de réaliser notre vision d'un monde plus igualitaire. ONU Mujeres ofrecerá una nueva dinámica para el diálogo mundial sobre la igualdad de género y traerá nueva energía a partir de múltiples talentos, reuniendo a hombres y mujeres de diferentes países y comunidades en un esfuerzo conjunto. So tonight, I invite you to celebrate with me. I hope that one day we will look back and see 2011 as a turning point, the beginning of a new era of gender equality and a better world for all. Because women's rights are human rights, I am UN Women, we are UN Women.
For not being with you here this evening. She very much wanted to be here, but was called away at the last minute on assignment, so here I am, honored to be among you tonight. It is a moment that women and men, frankly, all across the world have worked for. It's a historic moment that marks a turning point, really, in the history of women's empowerment and our journey towards gender equality. It's lovely to see a room full of people so vibrant this evening. It's been a very long journey, but along the way, this dream has been nurtured by the conviction that women's rights are human rights, and that the United Nations It's a simple goal, really. And that the United Nations has a special role to play in building a future where gender equality is the norm and not a dream. And it's been carried by the support of millions of women and men around the world. Many of you are here tonight amongst us, not just here in the auspicious United Nations General Assembly Hall, but in 2 other conference rooms on the UN grounds, as well as worldwide on webcasts, on TV, and on Twitter. That groundswell of support culminates tonight on the eve of the 100th anniversary of the International Women's Day, with the launch of the UN Women and United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment for Women. UN Women will be a global champion for women and girls, working on the fundamental premise that every woman has the right to live a life free from discrimination, violence, and poverty, and that gender equality is essential to achieving progress. Let's take a quick look at the journey that's brought us here tonight. Very podium, from the very seats that you're sitting from, so much history has taken part. It's worth repeating 3 times. Women's rights are human rights. Women's rights are human rights. Women's rights are human rights, once and for all, as Secretary Clinton said. All that took place right here in the General Assembly, where member states of the United Nations took the historic, unanimous decision to establish UN Women. The President of the General Assembly is a former President of the Swiss Confederation who led Switzerland's ascension to the UN in 2002. He's made the achievement of the Millennium Development Goals and sustainable economic growth his top priority, seeking international commitments to solve the economic and financial crisis and addressing the uneven progress in areas such as maternal health and infant mortality. Please welcome our first speaker, the Honorable Mr. Joseph Dice.
Secretary General, Madam Under Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished guests. It is a great honor for the President to welcome you to the General Assembly and to celebrate with you the official launch of UN Women just a few days before the 100th anniversary of the International Women's Day. What a great assembly! It is the best thing we could do in order to revitalize the General Assembly. Thank you for being here in this historical hall. When our organization was founded in 1945, member states expressed their strong determination to advance the status of women worldwide. The Charter of the United Nations was the first international agreement to state the principle of equality between men and women. In the preamble of the Charter, member states very explicitly, quote, reaffirm the equal rights of men and women, unquote. Over the years, the United Nations has been committed to empowering women through the adoption of and implementation of numerous resolutions, conventions, strategies, and programs. The General Assembly resolution to establish UN Women, adopted in July 2010 in this very room, lives up to this promise. It marks a fine moment in the history.
Thank you so much for your inspiration, and I think you remind us obviously of the challenges ahead, but also of the great promise and potential ahead of us. The success of social movements depends, of course, on the strong voices of every advocate, and UN Women has been backed by very, very strong voices indeed. The Gender Equality Architecture Reform Campaign, or GEAR for short, Advocates Among the Advocates, brought together 300 women and human rights groups from around the world to advocate for the creation of UN Women. And let me tell you, they not only shifted into drive, they shifted into overdrive. And one of them is a leading player of the women's movement in Nepal and president of SASI, which means friendship, a prominent women's rights group. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Vandana Rana.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today on behalf of the millions of women and men from across the world who advocated for the creation of UN Women. I come from Nepal, a country emerging from a decade-long armed conflict. Its impact was most devastating on women and girls. However, despite all the pain and destruction, the conflict also brought about some positive changes. Women make up 33% of the Constituent Assembly, the highest in the Asia Pacific. We have a special national action plan on gender-based violence that was launched in 2010 by the Prime Minister. The domestic violence legislation was adopted in 2009, and very recently, the National Action Plan on Security Council Resolutions 1320 1325 and 1820 was adopted and launched internationally in New York here at the CSW yesterday. The results of the strong advocacy from the vibrant civil society and women's movement in Nepal in the post-conflict and transition period after 2006, which had offered a window of hope. Much like the UN reform process in 2006, which also offered an opportunity for women's movement to demand for a new, fully fledged UN Women's Organization, an organization that really works for women and reaffirms the UN role as the most important actor to advance human rights and gender equality. To support this demand, people from around the globe engaged in what culminated as the Global Clear Gear campaign in 2007. And we have the gear in full gear here today. The campaign brought together the united and collective voices of grassroots and community women, civil society, NGOs, and individual men and women from across the world. In South Asia in 2006, we gathered 1 million signatures from women and men from all walks of life to support the creation of UN Women. And here is a sample of one of the books of those 1 million signatures that we collected from South Asia. Today, at the launch of UN Women, we come with a strong hope that UN Women will be able to deliver results and make a real impact on the ground, change women's status on a worldwide scale, and support grassroots movement. Take leadership in addressing the situation of women in armed conflict and in post-conflict situations in terms of participation in peace building and access to security. Have adequate funding to take up its role effectively. Institutionalize meaningful systematic engagement with women's groups and civil society organizations. And lastly, be a supporter and convener of the women's agenda. If this will happen, I strongly believe that UN Women will be the medium that will fulfill the long-awaited dreams of millions of women from around the world.
We celebrate the launch of UN Women, and we renew our commitment to the achievement of gender equity in our lifetime. I am convinced that we can do so if we all work together, and if we reach across the boundaries of nations, race, culture, and gender. Women are key agents of change and development, and to that effect, women's empowerment is vital. When we invest in a woman's health and education, we do not only improve their lives, but also help to build a strong foundation for families, communities, and nations. Yet despite this undeniable fact, progress to deliver on the Millennium Development Goals focused on women is terribly slow, and we are lagging behind. We see uneven progress on maternal mortality. We have made marginal progress on gender empowerment, and the likelihood of achieving universal access to reproductive health is worrying. We need to make gender equity our primary goal. We need to encourage all stakeholders and champions, governments, foundations, private sector, civil society, academic institutions, and individuals to invest in women's empowerment as an instrumental strategy to achieve the MDGs. I have no doubt that under the leadership of Michelle Bachelet, UN Women will support women's economic and political empowerment and protect women's rights around the world. These and other areas merit increased commitment. I am confident that UN Women will push for this, as well as deliver a strategy that results in increasing contributions, just as we have seen it happen in other fundamental issues from environment to agriculture. We need to do better, and I am convinced that together we can do better. I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the UN Secretary General for his commitment to women's health under the Every Woman, Every Child effort. Our next challenge is to translate this global strategy for women's and children's health to the regional and national levels. And
for far too long, women's will, women's voices, women's interests, priorities and needs have not been heard, have not determined who governs, have not guided how they govern and to what ends. This succinct statement by President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia highlights a major challenge for women and encapsulates the theme of my remarks this evening, the importance of women as political leaders. The participation and leadership of women in the political sphere is central to the mission of UN Women. Empirical evidence demonstrates that higher numbers of women in parliament lead to greater attention to women's issues and more direct engagement by women in public decision-making. Women in leadership positions can attest to these results, and all agree that equal opportunity for women is not a gift. Rather, it is a right that we have long since earned. Yet, distinguished guests, it is sobering to note that in many societies, few women hold public office. It is common knowledge that in every aspect of social interaction, women add value as adept negotiators, community leaders, entrepreneurs, and problem solvers. We also realize that such skills are critical in addressing multifaceted political issues.
What a night, huh? What a night. It makes me proud to be a human being. You know, we get so much bad news on the news nowadays. But every now and then something really good happens. And when it does, something really good happens in this world, it usually starts and the United Nations is behind it. So I'm so proud and so happy to be here tonight and to be able to say a few words in favor and support for UN Women. The evidence is clear. Empowering women and girls is one of the smartest, most productive things we can do in development. It benefits global health, economic growth, human rights, and even the environment. It makes all of us men feel better about ourselves. That's why I'm so excited about the launch of UN Women. For years, UN agencies have been doing vital work all over the world to support women's empowerment and gender equality. UN Women will make this important work even more effective and efficient. I want to congratulate the UN General Assembly for taking this historic step. And I want to congratulate our dear Secretary General Ban Ki-moon for his leadership and for selecting President Michelle Bachelet of Chile to lead UN Women. President Bachelet is a longtime champion of gender equality and human rights, and we are confident that she will do an outstanding job. And it's great to see another woman in a top leadership position. But President Bachelet...
Violence against women and girls is perhaps the most systematic, widespread human rights violation in the world.
Wherever she's gone, she's used her celebrity to give voice and visibility to women who would otherwise remain invisible.
Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I can even see you.
Great. Well, good afternoon from the United Nations.
I'm here. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but obviously I'm doing a film here in San Francisco. Today, with the launch of UN Women, we are celebrating the historic opportunity to be able to do more for women and with women. Ms. Bachelet, I am absolutely thrilled to be able to work with you and to help seize this opportunity. Since I took on my role as the Goodwill Ambassador, I've seen so many examples of how women roll up their sleeves and change their communities. And as you heard, I went to Haiti last year, and one of the women I met there was called
Historic launch of UN Women, and I heartily congratulate you, Mr. Secretary General, on this monumental achievement and for your very inspirational words tonight. I'm so proud to be a partner with UN Women, helping to reinforce the importance of positive gender representation in media as a tool toward forwarding women's and girls' empowerment around the world. I have appeared on screen as everything from a dead housewife to a pirate captain to the President of the United States, as you were. Thank you. But the first role that I ever played was a man. As little girls back in the 60s, my best friend and I play-acted brave characters from TV westerns. Because I was taller, I would usually play the father and she would be my son. Because we were young, we never realized that there were no female characters from TV or movies that we wanted to pretend to be. There were no female swashbucklers or sheriffs, no adventurers or experts. We'd like to assume that today, the marginalization and invisibility of female characters, especially in entertainments made for children, would be over, would be a relic of the past. Unfortunately, the reality is that gender stereotypes remain deeply entrenched in today's entertainment, and there has been no significant progress over the last
We believe that equality starts by providing the same opportunities to everyone, but especially women. My best wishes to you and women on this very special occasion, and to my dear friend, a truly amazing woman, President Michelle Bachelet. I'm convinced that this organization, under her wing, will make a difference in the lives of girls and women around the world.
Invitations to all the women of the world, the UN Women. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to begin by asking you to imagine the following scene in Monrovia, the capital of Liberia. Monrovia in the midst of the post-Civil War. People were extremely worried about their safety, and rightfully so. An Indian-formed police unit serving as part of the United Nations mission in Liberia was deployed to patrol the length and breadth of the city to prevent crime and restore peace. With the additional responsibility to guard the presidential office complex, a visual symbol of women empowerment. The fine work by the peacekeepers was widely acknowledged by the local community.